Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of the First Stars Podcast third season. For my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. It's an amazing episode because Steve Bynoe boards the mothership to discuss Atrium, now on Kickstarter. Now come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Bynoe. Thanks so much for coming to First Stars Podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Totally my pleasure. So, I always start with a question of inspiration. So, inspire your love for comics and who your earliest influences.
Oof. You know what? I got to give props to my two cousins, Peter and Spencer. They were when I was younger. They're about 4 or 5 years older than I was, and they had a big stash of comics from the Avengers, Iron Man, Thor, Black Panther. So I used to read their books when I'd go visit them. They lived in Barbados, and then they moved to Canada. Their dad was a diplomat. So they moved to Canada for a couple of years, and then I didn't have to travel across the ocean to kind of get into their stash. And then from there, after getting immersed in their collection, I was like, I'm gonna buy my own stuff, and I started reading Spider-Man and Hulk,
Hmm. So,
Nova, stuff like that.
so Marvel Zombie all the way, or do we ever tap into the DC world?
Love DC. I love both actually. On the DC side, I'm a Superman fan, although I never bought a lot of their comics, a lot of his like titles, but a humongous Teen Titans fan. So the
Hmm.
George Perez, Marv Wolfman run, totally loved it.
I think Mark Wolfman is one of those writers who don't get as much credit as they deserve. I think like over
Oh,
time
totally.
people have forgotten the name, but he's done so much great things.
Yeah, he's been great. And like when you think of like the Judas contract, um, just how seminal that Titans run is,
Hmm.
and that's not the only title he worked on. I think he also wrote Crisis on Infinite Earths and
Oh
stuff
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And when he collaborated with Perez, that combination is up there with any of the Byrne and Claremont
Hmm.
type of things, collaborations that you're looking for in comics.
Friend of the show, Mark Wolfman, been on the show. We got to talk Crisis Infinite Earths. I think we also did Tomb of Dracula was the other big one we spoke about when he introduced Blade.
Oh, very cool.
So that was
Right.
pretty cool. So we ended up in more in the Marvel world, but he's done so much great stuff, and Marvel has done so many seminal comic books over the last decades. Are you still reading?
Yes. Yeah, still reading. So obviously, I'm continuing to read the Hulk. I've kind of fallen off Spider-Man a little bit because I have to admit, not as interesting since some of the dubious stories of the '90s or post '90s.
Oh, I will
Um,
say I quit. I was buying Spider-Man every when Maximum Carnage started. I started buying Spider-Man, and then I quit after
right,
Clone Sega.
right, okay. Yeah, I'm around that time, and then I kind of got back in, and then there was the One More Day Sins of the
Oh,
Past thing,
yeah.
and I was like, no thanks. But I still love Spider-Man. Spider-Man's probably my favorite hero, and I'm reading a lot of indie stuff now. So I support a few Kickstarters. I'm reading. What am I reading? I just picked up The Pedestrian, a hilarious comic book about, I guess, a superhero that can't cross the street unless the signs are working his way. And I'm reading The Hulk, as I mentioned before. I think Prodigy is another one. I think
Hmm.
that's written by Mark Millar. I could be mistaken. And then all the indie stuff that I'm looking at through Kickstarter and other kind of avenues.
I like that you support Kickstarters and indie people because sometimes it feels like indie people don't support each other enough, and I kind of feel like sometimes indie people are the only ones who can support each other to make this run.
Yeah.
And I think it's great that you're not just doing your own Kickstarter, as we're going to discuss, and walking the walk, but you're also talking the talk and supporting the others that are out there.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with you. It's important. Especially with the way that the comics landscape is right now. A lot of people do kind of focus on the big two, and if you could extend that to Image and studios like Mad Cave and Distillery and I guess Ghost Machine, which is part of Image. A lot of the focus goes there, but there's a lot of really interesting storytelling that's going on outside of that sphere. And so when it comes to indie books, our backers and our circle of support, they're our lifeline. So
Hmm.
when you find something that's good, and if like this is like the first nudge to get a creator into the world, why not support them? Just think if James Cameron didn't do Piranha back in the 80s, I think it was Piranha 3D or whatever it was, there'd be no Terminator, there'd be no
Hmm.
Aliens. So everyone needs their start.
I agree 100%. I mean, I'm one of those people who think, well, I think, everyone, Kickstarter is democratic in the way that everyone gets to do it. I think there's some creators who are, I'm thinking to myself, why are you on Kickstarter? You're a massive name. You're gonna make money on the market, on the regular market. You don't need a Kickstarter. And I think sometimes they get the support where the people who need the Kickstarter sometimes don't. And I think that should be more where the attention goes.
Yeah, it's a tricky subject. But I get it since it's an open platform, anyone can use it. But yeah, if you already have a name, you already have a fan base, then it would seem as though Kickstarter is not necessarily something that you need to tap into.
Right.
Just set up your own URL and then use social media and drive sales to whatever you're doing. So what it does is it kind of there's so much noise out there that if you're just starting out or you have a small presence or you know it's in a genre that might not be like horror or whatever or TNA, not safe for work or whatever, you may go under the radar.
I agree. I find that Kickstarter, the TNA books are money in the bank.
Mm.
I personally wouldn't make a comic book, but like that. But let's face it, that's like easy money. I mean, that's like you might as well just like throw a dart at a chunk of money and it's gonna hit it, regardless where you throw it. You know what I'm saying? Um,
Yeah,
and I do think also for the bigger names, a Kickstarter elbows out the brick and mortar stores who could be making
yeah,
money as well off your book, and I think they need the attention as well from the bigger names. So I think Kickstarter, in my opinion, Kickstarter is always for the indie, who that
yeah.
is their marketing strategy. I can be on Kickstarter, I'm gonna have to ship from Kickstarter, and you're kind of like your own diamond and brick and mortar store and publisher all at once.
Yeah, I just that you just had something pop in my mind. What would actually be kind of great is if comic book stores had an indie section. It
Mm,
doesn't have to be large, right? But if stores kind of maybe connected with a few independent indie creators, they could be part of the Kickstarter and then get like retailer exclusives at
yeah.
their stores, right? So that'd be a kind of cool way for the stores to get their name out there, but also support, some of the creators that are in the ecosystem.
So you've had, is it four Kickstarters so far, or is it just the fourth one for Atrium?
This is just only the third one.
Third
And
one.
so we're finishing the miniseries. So Atrium is a 5-issue miniseries that we kickstarted in November of last year. And that was, how do I put this? A humongous learning curve because there's so much that you have to take into account. Making the book and coming up with the idea is almost the easiest part. Like completing it and then getting it printed and then fulfilling it and then marketing it. That's a whole other avenue. And so we did a second one in, I think, the spring of this year. And now we're doing our last one, which is on currently.
You know,
So it's three so far.
I've launched recently my own Kickstarters. This is going back in March. A sci-fi comic book, Annabelle Thomas. And I realized one thing I don't think most Kickstarters realize, and I bumped into that problem. You always underestimate the printing cost, and you always underestimate the shipping costs every time.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's the reason why we chunked our book together. The last two Kickstarters are basically 2 issues each, because when we looked at what the shipping cost was, we're like, you know what? Maybe we should package these books together,
Mm.
2 and 3 together, and then we'll do 4 and 5 together, and then it'll save our backers, in some cases up to 45 to maybe even $60 on shipping by just having them only buy, support 1 or 2 of the Kickstarters, right? So if you're only coming along now, you're basically getting 5 issues if you get 1 to 5, and you're only paying shipping for one set. But if
Mm.
you've been with us from the beginning, you're not getting punished like having to pay shipping 4 more times.
And from if memory serves, I looked at your campaign. You've already hit your goal. Congratulations. I think with like 20 something
Thank
days
you.
left. So
Yeah.
obviously you know what you're doing now because you've hit it fast. Almost I guess within the first week you bypassed it, less than a week. Um, so as someone as well who's in the publicist game, always looking for more information, what have you learned about promotion that someone like me and someone and the people who I talk to as well can learn from?
It's a never-ending game. I'll quote Jimmy Palmiotti if I can be so humble to do so. He said it's a never-ending hustle, right? So you
Hmm.
got to keep going. There's like I'm here in Canada, and hockey's our national sport. And there's a saying where you got to keep your feet moving, and that means that you're always in the play. You don't get left behind the play, and that's the thing that you have to do with social media. So be regularly tweeting, or if you're on X or whatever platform you're on, be in contact with your backers. If you have a mailing list, that's great. Get the word out, show interior art, because some people sometimes only show the covers
Hmm.
and they don't know what the inside looks like, right? Be open, be communicative, respond to people that are making comments. Then you can even do things like start a YouTube channel or do Instagram stories. Just make sure that you're always hubbing things. And if you have a local comic book store, see if you can get an in-store signing.
Hmm.
And that's
Now,
a good way to kind of drive attention to you.
one thing that you mentioned as well that I'm going to I want to get more information on. When you're talking about promoting on platforms, now from my experience, once again, as a publicist doing promotion, I'm finding that some platforms are losing steam. For instance, X seems to be falling off a little bit as a lot of more liberal creators run away from it to others. However, while they are running from X, does not seem to be a second platform that is gaining those that's or getting that attention. I mean, there's Blue Sky. There's what's the one with the not but there's Tribal. There's oh God, there's like two or three others that like fell apart almost. Like Hive, I think was big for like a week and then fell
Isn't there
apart.
like Clara or Cara or something like
Oh
that
yeah,
as
yeah.
well
For
too?
artists, there's that one now.
Yeah,
Facebook is trying to push back on anything with a link attached. Where do
yeah.
you think you go for platform attention now?
That's a great question, and that's something I don't think I necessarily have the answer to. I'm the kind of thing that I'm running into is, which is kind of great, is that I'm running into a lot of indie creators on these platforms as well too, and like being part of writers groups,
Hmm.
and so they'll sometimes retweet your stuff for you, or share the things for you. And another cool aspect of running a Kickstarter is sometimes you'll do a like for a like. So, or you can put your book in another person's kind of like grab bag in their
Hmm.
campaign. But in terms of like going to a particular platform, I don't have the answer to that one. It's so tricky because like you hear a lot of how everyone's reach is kind of getting tamped down,
Yeah.
and this is even for like established artists. So I'm not quite sure. I guess in a perfect world, creators would make their own, like if the comic book community as a whole could kind of cobble together a platform where we could kind of just disseminate the information that everyone else is doing. I think that would probably work best. But if you go on Instagram, as soon as you figure it out, you find out later that they've changed the algorithm,
Yeah.
and you're not quite sure. Like you think you have the answer, and then the answer's gone.
I agree. Like Instagram, I think is great for artists and great for views, but because the link doesn't work, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
You can't click it. I feel like my philosophy has always been as a publicist, the moment you need one extra step to do something, you've lost X number of potential clicks. You know, like that little copy and paste from Instagram to your Google Chrome is just enough to keep someone from doing it. You know, that little extra copy and
yeah,
paste, you know?
yeah. It's so true. It's like it's making that extra step that it's almost like anything that takes the user experience to be 10% more difficult
Yep.
or extra, you sometimes will lose people.
Yeah,
Like
same
that's absolutely correct.
same thing with I think ones that seem to be more active like TikTok or Reels or the YouTube Shorts. Once again, the link doesn't work, and so even though you'll get the views, you don't get the click, which is the part that matters. I mean, without the click, the views don't matter at that point.
Yeah, you're right. It's almost as though it's set up to fail when it
Yep.
comes to getting the kind of reach and in like I guess what's the word I'm looking for? Interaction and
Yep.
involvement that you're looking for. It always seems to be something that comes up, and then you're like, how come this didn't hit the way that you would have liked?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And like I said, going with your new campaign, Atrium, issues 4 and 5 is what you're launching together. Am I correct on that, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
which is now on Kickstarter live. So where did the idea for Atrium come from, and what intrigued you to? Because it's the difference between just writing one comic book and then dedicating yourself to the miniseries. Is that the amount of attention and work you really got to love the idea, you got to be devoted to the idea, and you got to be confident in the idea to keep going. So, what was it about the concept that made you think to yourself, "I feel confident that this is going to work. I feel this the story that I got to tell to be devoted for how many years to do it, and it's interesting enough for you that you want to keep exploring it."
Atrium has been a long simmering idea. It started, I think the creative team behind it. I'm one of the co-creators and co-writer on the team. I think we've been working on this for close to 12 years. It started as a short film that we were thinking of doing, just a little quick indie film. And then after exploring kind of the challenges of making independent film around 2010, 2012, we were like, let's maybe try it as a comic book. Fewer moving parts. Because a comic book essentially is a film, just with a smaller crew and a much leaner budget. But then finding the artist was the challenge. And so we finally found an artist, and it was a good friend of ours who's in the industry. But then it just got to a point where, as we were kind of solidifying the story and ready to pitch it, and we had actually drawn an issue, it just didn't work out. Our visions for the story kind of splintered a little bit. So we parted ways mutually. Still have a great relationship with the artist, and we had to kind of go back to the drawing board or the writing board for a little bit. And in a way, it actually made the story. Though we changed it, it made the story stronger. And that's not saying that what we had before wasn't great, but what we finally settled on, it was something that we were all kind of like really excited to get to market. And we found our artist on X of all places. That's back when it was Twitter, and it was another writer who put out an all call for an artist. And so there were tons of portfolios that were in the thread. And I came across Lucas Falapi, who is our artist, and I went back to the guys and I'm like, what do you think of Lucas's stuff? And everyone was like, thumbs up, enthusiastic. And he was great to talk to. He was like, the introduction went really well. And it's been magical since then. He's easy to work with. And his ideas, like when he changes something in the script, it's not something where you're like, oh, I can't believe you did that. It's like, hey, I didn't even think of that. That's like, he totally adds stuff to the story. And I also like his reactions when he gets the script and he's like, oh, I can't believe that happened, or oh, that was great, or I can't wait to draw.
Hmm.
And so working on something as long as we've done, it's something where it's like, you know what, we've had a lot of time to have it gestate, and we've been able to tweak it and make it like our own. And we always knew we wanted to have horror. We always knew we wanted to have action, and we were looking to have the subway system and the tunnels kind of like be a character unto itself to give that kind of claustrophobic feel.
Hmm.
And anyone who lives in a big city and has had to take the subway, kind of like your worst fear is being trapped in the tunnels or just being on a crowded subway at rush hour in the middle of summer and you're sweating like crazy. So we wanted to bring that kind of an atmosphere. And then no spoiler, because everyone knows now that vampires are part of the story. And then introducing that concept into the storyline, and then also building on the world that when we started it as a film, we didn't really have that backstory filled out. But then as we started to rework the story a little bit, and then as we were working on issues 1, 2, and 3, we're like, you know what? We can change this and make it something even broader than what we're working on right now.
So, the issues focus on Naomi and Darnell, who are two paramedics, and they're attempting to deliver a donor heart. So what is the significance about this heart that it must be delivered, and and it covers the crux of this series?
Well, I will say right off the bat, it is not a MacGuffin.
Okay.
The donor heart is essential to the story. There's a character that needs it, but we don't really jump into that. That's maybe if, not to give away too much, but that's something that's not the crux of the story. Getting the heart to that person, is the crux of it. So it's more about Naomi and Darnell's journey and growth from just doing their job and then being thrown into this ridiculous kind of circumstance where their lives are on the line and they still have to complete their mission. That's basically what the kind of like small contained story that we wanted to tell. If we ever get a chance to do another set of Atrium stories or Atrium books, then we'll delve into the significance of the heart.
Now, as you said, Darnell and Naomi are both paramedics, and they risk their lives to complete this delivery. I mean, they're being attacked by assassin vampires and things of that nature. Now, there aren't many jobs that I would think I'm going to risk my life for. I mean, most of us would probably be like, you know what? Fuck it, put the heart down, walk away. I don't give a shit that much about this job to deal with that. Why does Naomi and Darnell care so much about fulfilling this responsibility for them?
I just think it's their sense of self, it's their sense of purpose. It's one of those things where it's not just a job to them; it's something that defines them. Their job defines them. You know, like how you can run into teachers, and it's like they go that extra mile for students that aren't theirs, or even kids that are in the hall, or you know, you're in a local Walmart, and you know you can ask someone and they won't help you, but someone else will go the extra mile, or if you're trying to get your phone line fixed and you go, well, you know what, I'm going to connect you with somebody and they'll help you. It's always like relying on those types of people that even though they don't have to do everything that their job entails, they not only do that, but go the extra mile to make sure that they're doing a service for the people that rely on them. And so Darnell and Naomi are two of those people. And the people in the story are quite lucky that they're the ones who are tasked with delivering the heart.
Do they know who is going to be the receiver of the heart?
No, they do not.
Does
It's
it
one of
matter?
it's one of those kind of like need to know things.
So it doesn't matter to
Top
them who's
secret.
getting it. It just matters that it needs to be done.
Yeah, it's kind of like there's a bit of a running joke where it starts in issue one, and everyone's like why do we have a security team with us? This is kind of ridiculous. Delivering a heart, it's like a milk run. And then Darnell later on kind of shoots off his mouth about, yeah, milk run my ass when things go sideways.
Now, obviously, this isn't real world because what there's, I mean, as soon as you throw vampires into a world, it's no longer 100% real world. I mean, unless you believe there are vampires in our world, and in that case, we're talking about a different story, a different world. But let's say there aren't real vampires in our world, and but they're in the story. So, what element does their existence add to the world building, or how? I mean, is it understood that vampires exist? Is it a surprise to these people that vampires exist, and how much is vampirism a day-to-day aspect?
I can't get into that. That would spoil where we're going with it. But I'll let the audience know that vampires exist in this world. How much they are known is the mystery. And that's one of the linchpins to not only why Darnell and Naomi are asked to do what they do, but also one of the linchpins to what keeps this world that we're creating to be so special and so different. Um,
Now, I mean,
and
obviously,
I don't want to give away I don't want to give away too much, but that will be explained if we ever do extra stories.
well, I'm going to poke at you a little bit though on it because
Yeah,
it's
go
what I
ahead.
do. So the people, there's someone out there who knows who's getting this heart. Obviously, someone out there
Yeah.
knows who's getting the delivery. Someone out there chose Naomi and Darnell to do it. Is there a reason why they're chosen, or they just happen to be the ones who clocked in at the wrong time when this delivery was going to be asked for?
So I'll give you the backstory because this isn't anything that is secret or will ruin the reading experience for any of the readers. So this heart is going to a very important person who was part of an assassination attempt. And so the only way that they can survive is if they get the heart. And Naomi, it's just their number, right? It's not anything where they're like the Jason Bourne or James Bond of this world of paramedics. It's like they're tasked to do it. And you'll find out throughout the story that their security detail, that's their job. It's kind of like how kickers don't play quarterback.
Hmm.
So and them being kind of like overmatched in this world adds to some of the drama. You know, they're not there firing guns and flying through the air, trying to beat down the assassins that are on them on their trail, but they're doing their best to manage the situation as everything kind of goes sideways.
Now, the moment you introduce vampire assassins, that from the very concept of assassin means there's someone paying for the assassins to do what they're doing. Do we know who's doing the payment of this? And what is this the same person who did the assassinate paid for the assassination to begin with?
Yes, so there is someone behind it, and in the beginning of issue one, and the first few pages, you're introduced to an individual named Ramona, who is in contact with the hit team. And so they basically have a legion of hit squads scouring the city, trying to figure out which hospital the heart transplant is going to be operating, where that procedure is going to be done. So basically, you see her and you see a little bit of the network, but we don't know the full extent of it. We just know that they've got their spies and they are heavily armored and ready to do business.
So, as the writer, what would you say are the odds of the success of Darnell and Naomi?
On the face of it, not good. They're not good. I'll reiterate what Lucas got issue two, which has already been printed, and he's like, "Oh man, I can't believe that such and such happened to such and such." And I was just like, "Yeah, don't fall in love. Don't fall in love with anybody you're drawn." Um, so it's one of those kind of things, classic horror, right? Where every couple of beats, a character goes down. So it follows along that line, and they're in a perilous situation up against some pretty bad people. So that's part of the fun of it. Can they get out of it? Can they complete their mission?
So, as a story, five of them basically from starting point to delivering the heart, it's a very, there's a lot of momentum being built in getting to from A to B. Um, Sometimes as a writer, I know sometimes I do that. Sometimes the action and the plot just kind of force you in a direction, and it's hard to like back up and give character stuff like that. How are you able to like build the story without losing the action? How are you able to not let the story get absorbed too much by the momentum of the story?
No, that's a great question. The way that we kind of laid it out was, and it kind of basically came down to how we wanted to do the story as a whole. Were we going to do it as a graphic novel? Because when you do a film, beginning to end, unless you were doing it as a series. And then when we went to the idea of making it as a comic book, we decided, well, it's going to cost too much production wise, as well as maybe even for the backers to just do a straight graphic novel. That's a hard ask for someone who no one knows about,
Hmm.
like our creative team. The most well known members of our team are our colorists, Nikos Koutsas and Mike Torres, who color for Savage Dragon for Image.
That's very
So
cool.
yeah, like we're totally lucky to have them on the team, and they and Lucas as a combination really helped the story pop. And so what we decided to do was in the scale of 22, 24 pages, we wanted it almost to work like a serial and like the old school comics where every issue ended on a cliffhanger,
Hmm.
right? And so we then were able to figure out, so, all right, so these are the beats that we want for each issue. How do we then get to a point where it's like, oh, damn, I got to see what happens next? And it was kind of interesting. Like, I have a neighbor who's a huge comic fan. His name's Ernie. And when he finished number three, and he's like, man, I got to wait for 4 and 5 now. And I'm like, okay, thank you. I'm done. Peter and I, the co writer, we have done our job. And so there's a balance, right? Because when you have an ensemble piece, how do you get certain characters their time to shine? And how do you make them as 2 dimensional and 3 dimensional, sorry, as 3 dimensional as possible? Because when it's an action piece and you've got so many people, it's hard to get those beats. So you try to get it either through dialogue, conflict, or all out action where they do something that's crazy, right? And
Hmm.
is memorable. So you try to make sure that it all fits, but then also it's almost like a like music and almost like a heartbeat, right? So you have your beats that kind of go small and then you get them higher and then they go down again. And then so what it does is it's not this kind of monotone, because if you're like this all the time, that gets boring.
Hmm.
It's like ramp it up, slow it down. And then you have a character moment or you have something that gets you from A to B. So we start on the streets, we have the introduction, we got to get them into the tunnels, onto the subway, right? And then when you're in the subway, you reset everything, right?
Hmm.
And so it's those kind of things where you're always kind of like be balancing not only the setting and the characters, but also where you want the story to go. That you have to think about when you're making the decisions, for each issue.
Now, like I said, it sounds like a fantastic concept, and as we said, it's not live on Kickstarter. And one challenge that you always have as a Kickstarter is that you kind of have to keep ramping up your campaign from one to the next. I mean, you can't offer the same rewards that you did on the first one because backers probably already have the first one. They know keep going. So, what are some of the rewards you're most excited about in this campaign?
Well, we've got some posters. We've got bookmarks, if I remember correctly. With fridge magnets, and then what we decided to do is if we can get over 100 backers, we're thinking of having trading cards for each character.
Oh, very cool.
So for both the good guys and the bad guys with their bios on the back. And it's kind of like, like those DK books that you get for Star Wars where you're
Yep.
like, oh, that character you saw for like 3 seconds in like, I don't know, Revenge of the Sith or something. And you realize they have this massive backstory that, oh, I understand now why they were there. Their scenes may have been cut on the floor or whatever. We want to do something like that because we've got a lot of really cool characters and you only see them necessarily either through little bits of dialogue or what they do in the story. But I think that readers would be interested to realize, oh, that's what they had going on behind the scenes.
Hmm. Now, the other thing that obviously is a big deal because you already passed your goal. As soon as you pass your goal, your backers think to themselves, stretch goal time. You're going to get a stretch goal. Now, what are some of these stretch goals that are going to be cool for your backers that now everyone who backs now is now going to take part in?
T-shirts as well too, and we're also maybe looking at doing some original art.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. That's actually pretty big for a stretch goal. So everyone who backs is getting a t-shirt?
Yeah, yeah, we
Holy
have the
crap.
capabilities to get some stuff printed and it'd be cost effective. And so if we can get the amount of backers that make it, we'll decide like how many backers we need for that. We've discussed having T-shirts, an Atrium T-shirt,
Oh
as
shit.
something that you would get.
Oh, that's one of the more impressive stretch goals I've heard of on this show because usually it's something small like you'll get a magnet, but it's like, but that's a huge
Yeah,
one. I,
yeah, no, it's one of the things. Not to interrupt you, but we when we went to I think one of our first shows, we had T-shirts as a giveaway. So if you bought like say the first 3 issues, you get a free T-shirt, and people loved it. People were like, "I get a shirt, give me those issues." And then we'd run into them at a later con, and we're like, we really enjoyed the books. So it's one of those things where it kind of stuck with us, and it's always kind of have some swag for people to wear.
Very cool. Like I said, that sounds awesome. So now that everyone except about getting themselves a T-shirt, from between which dates is the campaign running for?
We started on the 22nd of September, which was a couple of days ago, and it runs until I think the 23rd of October.
So what's next?
More promotion, more interviews. We're doing in-store signings. I think I have one coming up on the 5th of October in Toronto. We've got a couple more conventions to go to. It's the end of the convention season, but we have a few more conventions to go to, and a couple more events, and then just on social media, giving some sneak peeks of pages and colors and covers. and also then updating our backers on where things are. As I mentioned before, having that constant communication with your backers is quite important. The
Now,
one thing that we didn't want to do is to have like a big long stretch where our backers are in limbo waiting
yeah.
for any kind of word.
So, is there a potential to have a second series of Atrium 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10?
Yes, there is. And we've actually had some people kind of reach out to us and go, can we get another five? Can we get another 10? Because they're looking at perhaps stretching it and then hopefully maybe turning it into something else, not
Very
just a
cool.
comic.
Very cool. Mr. Bynoe, it's been an absolute honor to speak with you, sir. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure chatting with you. I had a great time. And remember, anyone out there, keep it indie.
Thank you so much. Have a great night, sir.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Further Stars podcast. Please like and subscribe. Return for the next episode when Philip Taro Denson boards the mothership to discuss future tales on Amazon. To next voyage, travel on.